we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the EMS Committee meeting. And appreciate everybody coming out this morning. We're going to go ahead and start down our agenda. The first thing on our agenda, under item number 1, is an update on the status of revisions to Chapter 157. Brent, do you have any of that?
Sure, I can address that. They're with OGC, and they're going to be getting prepared to publish in the register. Once they go into the register, there'll be a public comment period. Jane said they plan to hold a public hearing as well on those. That we won't know that date until after they're published in the register. And then once they're in the register, DSH will address any comments, and then they'll go out for adoption. We're looking for the adoption time to be around January 2017.
All right. And then y'all will publish that public hearing, and yes. I think she was saying hopefully July timeframe based upon publication deadlines and everything.
Right. All right. And I would sign up on the, make sure you sign up for e-updates. If you'll go to the main DSHS webpage, on the right-hand side toward the bottom of the page, there's a place to look for the link to sign up for e-updates.
All right. And Jane also did mention at a meeting yesterday about that as you review those rules when they get in the Texas Register, and if you want to make public comments, it makes their life easier at DSHS if you can make those electronically, so email as opposed to sending in a letter, faxing something in. Those are all acceptable ways to make public comments, but the electronic ones are a lot easier for them to handle and track and deal with. Also, as a part of that, y'all may have noticed that Mr. Schmieder's not here. Evidently, he gained a daughter last weekend, and his son got married, and so he decided to celebrate by taking the entire week off. But I did get a chance to talk to him. He and Brett were at a meeting up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and the topic came up of the jurisprudence exams. Those of you who've been coming to these meetings, been watching the rule changes, or even watched the legislative session last year when it got put into law, understand that EMS certified personnel are going to start being required to take a jurisprudence exam when they recertify, and be taught the material in the jurisprudence exam in their initial certification courses. So there were some questions asked, and at the time they said they thought that the company they were going to go with, the cost would be about $40 per person at their recertification date. The idea behind the jurisprudence is that it's to make sure people know the stuff, not to fail them, so it's an online program. You keep basically taking the test until you get the test right, kind of like ACLS. And, oh, sorry, did I say that out loud? And the cost of $40 per certified person for agencies who recertify their people kind of raised a little bit of a concern. And so they are continuing to evaluate their options. The selection has not been made as to who they're going to use to provide that service for the state. And there's a whole host of issues around it. So the desire, I believe, was to start it in January. I don't even think that's set in stone yet that it would start in January. But right now, it's anywhere. There will be a cost to perform the exam, but it's going to range. Right now, they're looking at ranges between $10 and $40, and a lot of that depends upon who they go with and the processes they're going to use and that type of thing. So did I mess anything up?
Exactly right, Billy. You got it all right.
Okay. So nobody panic yet. I know all the agencies who do that for their folks have to budget, and we're in prime budget season now. Right now, look at who you got expiring in your next fiscal year. For safety, put in $40 ahead if your agency is going to be paying for that. But hopefully, the state will be able to work out a deal, and it won't be that expensive. So. All right, next on our agenda is the EMS for Children update. Mr. Vance.
If possible, could I ask you to go ahead and do the registry update? I'm just waiting a few minutes for Dr. Remick.
Oh, sure. Sure.
Appreciate it.
Oh, no, you're not. She's here.
Oh, well, there she is right there.
Look at that. Dr. Remick, come on up.
Ask and you shall receive.
We call that good timing right
That
there.
is perfect timing.
Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Wade. My name is Kate Remick. I'm a Peds Emergency Medicine and EMS physician. I sit on the EMS for Children Advisory Council for both Texas and on the federal level. And I wanted to speak a little bit about pediatric facility recognition and give you some background on that with one ask at the end. But there's I want to start just by saying, there's a general public expectation that when you show up at an emergency department with your child, that hospital is ready to stabilize and/or manage that medical emergency. We know that there are national guidelines that have recommended what that infrastructure might look like at a hospital level in terms of what they would have in the emergency department to be able to take care of a particular child. And that includes things like equipment and supplies, of course, but it also includes things like a patient care review process. Are they actually looking at the children who come into their emergency department to see what's been done and how well they delivered care to that child? Is there someone who's looking out for those children? Are there policies in place? Are there patient safety measures in place for children? There was a national assessment that was done in 2013 of all acute care hospitals in the United States and the U.S. territories to look at how well our hospitals are in compliance with national guidelines. And these national guidelines were written by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Emergency Nurses Association, as well as the American College of Emergency Physicians. It's been supported and endorsed by multiple professional organizations, including the American Medical Association, the American Heart Association, the Joint Commission, as well as others. And this national assessment that was performed in 2013 had over an 83% response rate. So over 4,000 hospitals actually participated in this survey, in this self-assessment to see how they were doing. And what we know from that assessment, unfortunately, is that gaps continue to exist in our nation's ability to care for children. The median readiness score was 69 on a 100-point scale. So significant gaps. We found that less than 50% of hospitals have a disaster plan that includes pediatric needs. We found that less than 50% of hospitals have a quality improvement plan or patient care process in place that includes children. Fortunately, most hospitals do have the supplies and equipment, but the other gaps are related to some of these more fundamental elements and include things like patient safety and policies and procedures. The Federal EMS for Children program has developed a toolkit that's readily accessible on the internet and freely available to any provider. Anybody can go on it. You don't even have to be a provider, but it provides templates, checklists, things like that to help facilities to become pediatric ready. What we know is that now about 14 states and or regions have developed pediatric facility recognition processes to help facilities to be recognized and to increase awareness of what needs to be in place to take care of children. This is particularly important because we know that about 80% of children are actually seen in non-children's hospitals. So where are we getting the most bang for our buck? It's in bolstering our community EDs, not in recommending that they be transported 300 miles away to the nearest children's hospital. So how can we bolster our community EDs to care for the children in our communities? I think it's a public expectation, and I think most of you would agree with that, that when you show up at an emergency department, you expect them to be able to care for your children. So we know from these pediatric facility recognition programs that they do in fact result in improvement. When a facility participates, they gain awareness, they try to become ready, that in fact they do become ready, and that their readiness scores based on the survey were in the 90% range as opposed to the 60% range. So a pretty significant difference. What we're asking now of committees is, can we support this idea in concept as we begin to and continue to work with numerous stakeholders about how that might look in the state of Texas? We've already begun talking with a number of our stakeholders, including the RAC chairs, the Children's Hospital Association of Texas, the Texas Pediatric Society, which is AAP's pediatric chapter. There's the Texas ENA has formally endorsed this. We've been having conversations with TTAF as well as the Texas Hospital Association. So many of these conversations have already begun. We don't know exactly what that would look like in the state of Texas, but we know that the pediatric facility recognition programs that are currently in place are highly variable. Some of them are single-tier systems. Most, I would say, are voluntary as opposed to mandatory. But is this something that we can support in the state of Texas so that we can begin to pull together stakeholders and move forward?
Any questions? All right, thank you for presenting.
Thank you.
Sam, do you have anything else for us?
Just one thing that I want to mention and remind everybody of, next week is EMS week. And on the Wednesday of EMS week is EMS for Children Day. We always give out our EMS for Children Career of the Year Award during that week. This year's recipient is the transport team from Children's Health Children's Medical Center in Dallas, and we'll be presenting that next Tuesday at 10 o'clock at their hangar at the left field.
Okay. Awesome. All righty.
I did, and just to follow up on what Dr. Remick had asked, we are asking for you all to endorse the concept of facility recognition.
And is there a deadline on that? Because I know education, because it wasn't on their agenda, kind of paused to take action on it.
They did. We would prefer to have an answer today because we'd like to take it to the council on Friday morning,
Okay.
if possible.
Okay.
Yeah, it is on the
On
council's
GTAC's
agenda. Yeah.
Okay.
And it did go through every other committee yesterday, and it was approved by each of those committees yesterday.
So, thoughts from the committee on supporting their effort for pediatric center recognition? Really, somebody needs to at least show me a sign of life, something.
Who all will be a part of putting together this recognition program as far as deciding what the criteria is, how it'll be met, and all that?
So it would be based on the representatives, the stakeholders. So that would include all the stakeholders that I mentioned already, including the state chapters for those national organizations, THA, TTAF, and ultimately we'd like for it to be approved through GTAC once that is developed.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Is there anybody that thinks this is a bad idea? All right. So would it be safe to say, since it's not on our agenda, or are you okay?
You do have EMS for children on your agenda.
We do, so we can actually say something cool. So could I get a motion to support? All right, Tammy makes a motion. Wow, there's a sign of life. Good. Another hand. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Awesome. You got our support. Anything we can do to help, if you need a member of our committee to help with that, let me know. They're all ducking under the table now, but let me know, and we'd be happy to help in any way that we can as well.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and as we move forward into that planning stages, in addition to the stakeholders that Dr. Remick mentioned, everybody will be welcome to attend all those meetings. So,
Okay.
thank you.
You bet. Thank you, Sam. Our update on the EMS and trauma registry.
I am Dan Dow from the EMS and Trauma Registries. Today I'm joined by Judy Whitfield, who will be giving updates on our activities.
Good morning. I'm Judy Whitfield with the EMS and Trauma Registry Operations Support Team. We are proceeding with implementation of the NMSIS 3.3.4 national standards, and we are asking software vendors to contact the registry to submit test files to ensure accuracy prior to submitting uploads. We are approaching the 6-month mark toward implementing the XML file uploads, which the TXT files will go away December 31st. The legacy system will be pulled down at that time, so we will accept only XML January 1 of 2017. I want to remind everybody about the EMS data management course in Belton on June the 15th. DSHS is sponsoring one RAC person, one person from each RAC, and will cover registration and travel expenses. We've so far heard from only 6 RACs, so if you have EMS staff who could benefit from this data management course, please contact your RAC. The executive directors are coordinating that with me. We're planning several RAC visits this summer, and we hope to be able to visit the general membership meetings so that we can contact both EMS and hospital people to make the trips as beneficial as possible. But if you have any EMS-related items that you would like for us to address during our visits to the RACs, please let us know, and we'll be glad to work that out. As I'm sure you are all aware, the DSHS website is currently down for maintenance, We have a temporary website set up that has a majority of our registry resources available, including our user guide. So I am going to email that link to the executive directors and RAC chairs so that they can blast it out to all of their members. And if there's any resources that are not available on the website, please just send an email to the injury.web@dshs.state.tx.us mailbox, and we'll be glad to address that. Thank you.
And then from a data perspective, we've been working on creating a report calendar, and we like to do the annual EMS update report be delivered at the third GTAC of the year. We can also provide a short presentation if needed. The current one we are currently working on updating, and we're trying to reach out to the committee members to get their feedback and comments on it so that it's a document for your use. And I believe that's it. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Go ahead.
Okay, so January 1, 2017, you're no longer going to accept anything other than the XML file.
Correct.
All right, so what is the plan for systems that their vendor is not able to upgrade their system to be able to provide that by then?
We're working closely with most of the vendors now to get the XML files uploaded. So if you have any questions, you can contact our staff and we'll provide as much assistance as we can. But it's been a lot of one-on-one with us and vendors.
So I can tell you from my perspective, our vendor is ready to go. The process of us converting to be able to capture the NEMSIS 3.4, 3.3.4.4.5, whatever that number is. 3.3.5 to the second power. That process for us is going to take some time, and I'm just one system, and my vendor does a lot of different systems around the state. I think we've talked about this before. I think that the timeline is way too short. I'm probably going to be able to have mine done, but I'm just one system. So that's what my concern would be.
We had discussed the deadline back when Chris Drucker was here and had previously talked about implementing it sooner, and the vendors said they needed more time. So we added an additional year onto the timeline. So we're coming up on the end of that timeline at this time.
Right, so my vendor just made the software upgrades available within the last month. So, I mean, I understand that we're in May, but for my system, it's going to take me 3 months to implement.
Have them contact us and we'll work with them hand in hand to get the files.
Yeah, I think
I'm working. Go ahead.
But I was just going to say, I was going to ask before Brian asked his question. The question I had was, y'all are very confident January 1, 2017 is going to happen. What level of confidence do you guys have that's not going to slide? And I know you don't want to say, yeah, it's going to slide, or, but is this a very high degree of confidence that it's going to happen January 1? I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I was just looking to see if Rob Klein, our project manager, was in attendance.
Is there a confidence?
So, because what Brian is alluding to is that it is a two-step process, right? The vendors have to get cleared by you, and we can't upgrade to what they're clearing through you until it's cleared through you, because then we can't upload the data we're generating today. So, I mean, your approval starts the next level of the process, and for some agencies and some of their vendors, that next step it can be a little bit of a weighty pool to make, or a big step to make. We're in May. But just as we progress, as we talk in August, realize as people start to get a little bit more panicky, and we have that moment I like to call the refreak moment, which will probably happen in August, that once the vendors get cleared by you, that we've still got, the agencies still have the work they need to do to get the new version in place so that they can actually be using it by January 1. So
thanks for those concerns. Currently we've just been working one-on-one with vendors individually. So we're going through our process of having them get their files in and just working with them on that level. So again, if you have questions or if you are worried, feel free to contact our staff and we'll do whatever we
Okay.
can.
So is this an all or none? I mean, is there the possibility of accepting both sides of that data? I mean,
Since our project manager is not here, I can't answer that, but we will take that back to him and our leadership and ask that
because
question.
if you can take legacy data and the new data for at least, 6 months.
The problem is, though, that if we push them to slide the date, then in June of 17, we're going to be pushing them to slide.
Right.
I mean, there's going to be a time we have to step off the cliff.
Exactly.
They know from their end what vendors are still working, and providers know who their vendors are. So if they're concerned about their vendor being able to get it to them in time to hit January 1, those conversations need to be had between the agencies and the registry, and between the agencies and their vendors, right? I mean, the vendor I use, I think, is the same vendor you use, and they've finally gotten it done. Now we start the lengthy process of changing over. I mean, it's an entirely different data set. For those that haven't looked at the data that your medics are going to be collecting under NMSIS, might want to take a peek at that pretty soon, because it is going to be an eye-opening experience if you haven't looked at it. So, Dr. Beeson, did you have something you wanted to?
Yes,
I saw you lurking to the front.
So, we had these conversations over a year ago. The state of Texas, their boss and Joe both went to NSIMSO last year and the NMSIS TAC about the push, because the push was to go to 3.4. We just are getting up to 3.3.4. And we said every year ago, every one of the vendors will tell you they are in the process of doing it, but there are only a handful that actually have any desire to go to the 3.3.4, much less the 3.4, which will come out next year. So all of your vendors, you need to go, anybody that has a vendor, you need to go to the NMSIS website and look at vendors and see where they are. And if your vendor has not started the process, then more than likely they have no intentions of going through the process. They're just continuing to take your money and tell you that they're going to do something they have no intentions to do. So you need to go to the NMSIS website. And if you're a vendor, it'll tell you what, if they're version 2, version 3.3.4, if they're in process of 3.4. And if your vendor's not on there, don't trust what they're telling you.
And the other piece of that is realize that the vendors are balking a little bit. They don't want to tell you bad news, because bad news has a tendency to delay or stop checks going their direction. So they may try to blame. I mean, this has been coming. Dr. Beeson's exactly correct. We've been talking about this for years. Several years ago, we were all upset because we were not NMSIS compliant. And the largest state, or well, the largest, in my opinion, the largest state in the nation, because Alaska's going to defrost someday, and we're going to be bigger than they are. As one of the largest states in the nation, not being in NMSIS, we were all embarrassed by that. Now we're looking at getting into NMSIS, and operationally we're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what we're going to do, because it is a significant difference. But it's time that we've got to. The registry is getting ready for us to go January 1. We got to hold our vendors' feet to the fire and make sure that they're ready to go. And then we got to get our medics ready to go by then too. So it's going to be a busy 7 months, but hopefully everything comes in together and everything works and we can kick off January 1.
So don't misunderstand my comment. It wasn't that we can't do it, or it was more along the lines of, we have that workability to where we can accept both sides of this for, past January 1, or are you going to shut the system off and you can't do it, and you have to go in there and manually import these records, manually input the record, which is extremely cumbersome. That was the question. That was the comment. So, just a thought.
And then on the reports you're going to do for us annually, you said third GTEC, that's third calendar GTEC, so the August meetings?
Yeah, correct, the August meeting.
Okay. And are you going to be prepared in like 3 months to show us? I think you said you were working on that, right?
Yeah, that one's a little easier than the other one, yeah. But if anyone on the committee would like to have comments on the report, feel free to give me your business cards, and then we'll send out those reports to you early, rough drafts done, so that we can, when we do come to the next one, the final is going to be at least a collaboration in my mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else for the registry folks? All right, thank y'all. All right, we're going to buzz through these next items somewhat quickly. because we talked about forming a large number of work groups last session. We took them to GTAC in February on that Friday, and we got them all approved. And we even got one added that we didn't take there. So we're going to kind of walk through where we are on those, and I'll just let you know. Because of all the work we've been doing, I kind of made a purposeful decision. None of these are really pressing items, but more long-term. One of them kind of is, but the rest are long-term, looking at helping DSHS develop some programs that we need in the state. So we made a decision not to do any work on them in this spring quarter. So we'll probably start after this meeting, and so we still got time for folks who want to be involved. So number 4 is the work group exploring the development of a state-approved process designed to rehabilitate EMS personnel with substance abuse problems and reintegrate them into the EMS workforce. And we had long discussion about this, about the need for this. Joe talked about the capability DSHS has to bless these programs through legislation. It's just never been done. And so a lot of folks felt we really needed to get involved in that. So we agreed to set up a work group to start walking down that path to see what other agencies in Texas are doing, what other states are doing, and to try to come back with some best practices and some ideas about what Texas could do as well going down that path. I asked for people who would like to be involved in that, and I got Ryan Matthews, our GTAC liaison, Mike Click, who's another GTAC council member, and Makara Trusty from MedStar, all agreed to be on that, but we'd like to have a few more. So if that's a passionate item for you, if you could throw me your business card when this meeting is over, please write on it which work group you want to be a part of, or you can email me, and I will get you on that work group, and we'll get that one started. Anything from the committee or the public on that work group? All righty. The next one is a work group to develop or to solicit and combine and look at best practices and issues regarding patients carrying firearms on ambulances. As everybody is aware, open carry became the law of the land here in Texas in January, and there are a lot of agencies that are struggling with this to some degree. What can they do? What can't they do? Some folks just trying to do their own thing, and so we were asked to put together a group to look at some of the best practices that agencies around the state have done, explore the law on this issue, and to develop a document for folks to utilize when trying to make decisions on how to best respond to issues regarding open carry, concealed carry, and the presence of firearms on their ambulances. Justin Boyd off the EMS committee agreed to chair that, and folks that have agreed to work with him is Judge Mike DeLoach, who's on GTAC, Dr. Eastridge, Eddie Martin, who's on the committee, and Mark Montgomery, the Emergency Planning and Response Director for STRAC. And Justin still would be willing to have anybody work with him, I believe, that has an interest in that and could maybe help or has some really good ideas. Maybe you've done some of this work already. You're more than willing to sit down with Justin and be a part of that work group. Justin, do you have any update?
I spent a little time talking with Joe and some of the other committee or work group members, and I think the first thing that we're going to do is reach out to DSHS and get a stance on where they think this needs to be, to get something on writing. We don't expect that they're going to touch it, but they're going to give us some guidance since we are their providers and they are licensing us. After that, we'll look out through our state EMS director and his contacts through the nation and see if we can't see anything in other states, if anything exists, and then we'll just simply go from there. But right now, I think the first step is to reach out to DSHS formally and get their response, because I know that there is some discussions about private firms and county firms and the ownerships of the firms and what their responsibilities are. So we're going to look to them first, get some direction, and move forward.
All right. Anything from the public or the committee on the open carry piece? All righty. Next work group is it's not, it's the potential of creating a work group, but update on air medical issues from across the state and the potential creation of a work group in collaboration with the Air Medical Committee to address them. Several sessions ago, I spoke to the Air Medical Committee and several other committees about some of the concerns that were coming our way as a committee from around the state. Since that time, several of those concerns have started popping up across the nation about the air medical industry, and several of those concerns from high fees to billing for not transporting patients and things like that. So I'll tell you the truth, Shirley and I have not been able to sit down and really talk about putting a group together to address this yet. I know that they're working on some stuff within their committee on some of these issues, as well as the industry's trying to address some of the things that have been coming out. So no real update there. And no creation of the work group yet. There's been no conversation on setting that up. So if you are interested in serving on that, I would be happy to take your names so that when Shirley and I do get a chance to actually set something up and to move that forward, we'll have a group of names. So feel free to let me know if you're interested in that one. I'm going to skip number 7 real quick and talk about number 8. We were asked by the Medical Directors Committee to put a work group together with them to look at formulating the template language for the EMS Medical Director agreements. There's been a lot of concern. The Medical Directors talked about it quite a bit at their last meeting in February about what is and is not covered, how you could do some things in those agreements and things like that. So Medical Directors took that to the GTAC Committee. GTAC blessed that combined work group to be formed. Dr. Beeson, I don't know if you've got it formed up yet, but I am happy to take help. I think we need a couple, 3 folks that can work with the medical directors to develop that template. So if you're interested, let me know. Same with the audience. If you guys are interested in representing EMS on that, let me know. And we'll get 2 or 3 names to Dr. Beeson so they can get y'all involved in that process. Anything from the room on that one? All right, let's see, we are cooking through this. There's 57 minutes left. Oh, we're all going to get an early lunch. Back up one to number 7. During GTAC in February, the discussion came up from Dr. Greenberg about putting together a work group that could look at the feasibility of developing, I'm going to say the word best practices again, that's getting a little cliche, but maybe some methodologies or a white paper behind processes that would be needed to move some patients on interfacility transports by private vehicle. Those who are in the interfacility transport business from hospital to hospital, ER to hospital, realize that a lot of those patients really don't need an ambulance, but they're being moved for a whole host of reasons, misplaced liability concerns or whatever it may be. And so there were a number of folks that were interested in that. And again, we've not kicked this one off either, but Jory Klein, Steve Drawley, Dr. Kidd, Dr. Miramontes, Ryan Matthews, and potentially Dr. Beeson, who I think was out of the room on a break at the time that his name was mentioned, were all those who were mentioned as potentially being involved in that. Again, that's going to be a little bit of a hot button issue, I think. But I think from a transport side, from a medical director side, and from an ER physician side, I think if we could get something done along those lines, I think it's a valiant effort to start down the path we're trying to do. So, any discussion on that? Any thoughts? Anybody? This one too. This one, I got those names at GTAC as I was walking back to my chair after getting voluntold that we needed to put that together. Anybody, this is the first meeting we've really discussed it, so if there's anybody interested, please let me know that you're interested in that. Again, business card, email, whatever it is, and we'll get you involved in that group. I imagine that'll be a little bit of a long-term project, kind of like the impaired medic program is going to be a long-term project, but I think it will help our industry and will help us in Texas in a lot of regards be able to try to find and develop a process to be used in those situations.
So Dudley?
Yes, sir.
There was something that came out a couple weeks ago, I saw from California, I believe, And it brought up some great concerns, and I saw this on the agenda, but appears to be in California that they are developing or having a Uber for non-emergent medical patients. That's the best way I can put it. It's an Uber app that you can log on to the internet, and if you need to be transported for non-emergent medical needs, you do it very similar to the way Uber works. You find the one that's closest to you, and you contact them, and they will come by and pick you up and take you to your destination. The thing that was a little scary is that in the promotion, it has a gentleman's picture, and underneath this picture, it says EMTB. This was brought out at the National EMS Conference a couple weeks ago in San Antonio, and we about fell over. I think that probably needs to be addressed, and we probably need to look at that within this work group, because if it's in California or in other states, it will be fastly heading this way. We'll have Ubers taking non-emergency medical patients to the doctor or to the ER or to wherever they need to be. The actual website, if you want to look at it, is www.saferideapp.org. That's SAFERIDEAPP.org, and it's pretty interesting.
Okay. Anything else on moving patients by private vehicle? All right, when I put out the call for agenda items for this meeting, one of the ones that came up was one that it's kind of the third rail of pre-hospital medicine. Some agencies have been bold enough to step up and actually try to work through the issues. A lot of other agencies have chosen not to, or maybe have not realized that they're making a choice not to look at it. And that is the issue with fatigue and shift links and being prepared for duty from our folks that are out there running the calls. And so I offered to put this on there to start the conversation. I thought, this would be a good agenda. I knew it would be a little bit light since none of these work groups had started yet, and thought maybe we could get some good public comment going, maybe have some discussions. After turning this into DSHS, Joe Schmieder sent me two web links, one from the National EMS Advisory Council on fatigue and EMS, and that was adopted way back in 2013, and then another statement or another document from NHTSA and the state EMS officials group kicking off an effort to look at fatigue risk management. So with the website being down, I didn't turn these in to be printed off and published, but they'll be up as soon as we can get that back there, and so you can read these. But the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to maybe have some time to start a conversation. I thought the best way to do that was to reach out to one of the agencies that I know of that has boldly stepped forward several years ago to start looking at this. They've actually had some science developed. They actually have some science behind what they're doing, and they've not stopped looking at it. They've continued to look at it and are knee deep in the middle of it, even as we speak today. And so Ernie Rodriguez, the chief of Austin Travis County EMS, was gracious enough to come out and speak with us today. So Ernie, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you and let you share what you have for us.
Great. First of all, I want to thank you for even opening the discussion. I think it's a good discussion to have, and I commend you on the courage to be willing to do that, because if you don't think it's a touchy subject, just go to talk about those 24-hour shifts and see what happens to you. I used to be taller. Not that tall anymore.
You used to have hair too.
That's right. That's gone. Did you notice? So we started working on this in 2006, and in fact it was this time, 2006, when we started changing from a 56-hour work week to a 48-hour work week. What we were working on then was trying to get a better work-life balance for our personnel, give them more time to be able to do family stuff and things that matter to them. And we were also trying to adapt to what we knew was going to be a continuously growing busy system. Well, here we are 10 years later, and right now as we speak, we're now beginning to change from a 48-hour work week to a 42-hour work week. And we've got two things that we're trying to work on right now. One of them is we want to give 6 hours of life back to our personnel. We want them to be able to recuperate from what they're exposed to, both physically and mentally and emotionally, when they come and do their jobs. We are faced with growing call volume. We're anticipating 5% growth year over year for the next 5 years, and that's pretty huge for us. We also cover the county, and they're looking at a 3% growth for the next 5 years, year over year. So we're dealing with all of that. But now we have something else that we've come to recognize, and that's cumulative fatigue. And I think that's what we're referring to when we say fatigue. We're not just talking about being tired today on a shift. We're talking about being tired over time, and that's cumulative fatigue. So here's some of the things that we've learned, and some of them are a little bit startling. The things that I'm going to mention now are easily found by doing internet searches about fatigue, cumulative fatigue, and stress as it affects public safety workers. There's one thing we talked about when I worked with the Department of Health. We always used to pull stats on years of life lost. Years of life lost is a measure of lost in productivity from human beings when they die. Well, one of the studies I found points out that public safety personnel live 15 years less than people that don't do that for a living. That's 15 years of life lost for public safety personnel that's not experienced by other career areas. I want those 15 years back, by the way. I think that's something that we need to be aware of right now and save those 15 years of those that are coming in the future. Another thing is that at about 16 years, EMS professionals begin to have an increased susceptibility to things like anxiety, depression, and other mental health care issues. And when I first looked at that study, I thought, wow, I guess that happens in busy systems. As I kept reading the study, I found out that it's not. That affects providers in rural communities with low call volumes just as much at about the 16th year of service. And I don't know why, there's no cause explanation in that, but when they talk to hundreds and hundreds of professionals, this is what was found in that study. Another thing that you'll find pretty easily as you search the internet for what's happening in our industry, we're seeing an increased number of personnel that are beginning to experience mental health challenges, alcohol use, drug use, divorce, relationship issues, and suicide. We experienced 2 in 2 consecutive years in our system, and it's devastating. It's devastating not just personally to the individuals and their family, but to the organization. Much of what we're seeing actually does have a root cause, and that's that root cause that we have to pursue and defeat. And it's post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is alive and well. It exists. Many of us probably are walking around today not diagnosed with it, but are experiencing it in our lives and trying to cope with whatever it is that's happening, not knowing how to do that properly, and using our best homegrown methods to do that. So PTSD is something that needs to be recognized in our industry as a huge issue, and we need to find ways to deal with it. So let me move on to a few solutions. One of the first things that I hear a lot as I talk to leaders all over the state and other areas is we talk about work ethic. Oftentimes us boomers who have the work ethic of steel are those that were the first to criticize others who don't seem to have that. So there's a difference between living to work and working to live. The first thing that we need to do is recognize is that both of those are okay. But today's generation is working to live. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So as leaders, especially those of us that are more mature, I don't want to say old, but more mature, yeah, we need to understand that that isn't a work ethic. it's a generational shift, and it's a generational shift to the positive, not the negative. We need to suspend judgment when we encounter that. And it's often misunderstood as a generational issue. It really isn't. We're beginning to recognize it now, but it's vastly important. As for strategy, the strategy that we've adopted is something that I just call EMS Strong, because I don't know what else to call it. If you could imagine a triangle, it has 3 legs on it. One leg is health, and what we ask is that every EMS person see a doctor once a year. And we're not talking about at the ED and they walk by. We're talking about you go, you make an appointment, you sit down, take your clothes off, and have at it. Okay, so let me clarify. I do that with the media all the time. I don't know why I get in trouble. I went to my first visit with my doctor in 10 years, actually, and they went places no person should ever go. But I'll tell you what, I walked out of there with a clean bill of health, and that was amazing. It felt great, and I learned stuff about myself. Lost 30 pounds. That's no applause? Okay, well, I'll move on. The next thing is fitness. One leg of your EMS Strong triangle needs to be fitness. I encourage everybody to research the Fit Responder program and bring that kind of information back to your personnel. The comparison that I like to make is that when you're on duty, you're about to go run a game. You're about to run a pass or try to run a touchdown or something like that. And if you're like I used to be, when I used to watch TV when I was on duty, and I'd get nice and cold and stiff, and then I'd go out and lift a stretcher, and all of a sudden things didn't work like they should. A Fit Responder teaches you how to stay warmed up the whole shift, so that you can remain limber and stretched out, so that when you do that heavy work, your body can respond to it appropriately. And then the base leg of that triangle is well-being, and that is providing the tools and the resources necessary to get mental and spiritual health support when you need it. Then there's work environment, and this is where the shifts come into place. At first, when I started walking into this, I thought, okay, 24-hour shifts just need to go. They're the worst thing on the planet. What I've learned since then is 24-hour shifts are used in industries throughout the world, and it's done safely. So 24-hour shifts can be done safely. One of the things that I've learned through Circadian, which is a company that we hired to help us understand this better and to help us develop a safety risk management plan, is that a 24-hour shift with a 6-hour rest opportunity built into it is healthy. You can survive that and go for a long time. That's not that easy to do, though. So there's ways to do that. The other thing is to learn to monitor those shifts for workload, learn to manage nutrition, and include rest periods throughout the shift. You can do a healthy 24-hour shift. But you have to be highly committed to doing it and doing it right, because none of these things, as simple as they sound, are easy to do. Shorter shifts. There's an assumption that shorter shifts are just automatically better because they're shorter. Well, shorter shifts can be just as grueling as long shifts, especially in busy systems. The other thing is that what we were pursuing is work-life balance, but it can be more difficult in a shorter shift because you've got less time in between those shifts. If you're working shorter shifts, if you want to have a regular paycheck, you've got to work so many hours. So you've got fewer hours in between for recuperative time and rest. So shorter shifts have their own challenges as well. And then there's exposure to traumatic events. For many years, we have thought that we're waiting for the event to happen, and then we respond to it with debriefing and other sorts of support. What we've learned today is that exposure is not dependent on a particular incident. It can be an accumulation of incidents and exposures that happen. And those exposures don't need to be earth-shattering. It depends on the individual and the accumulation of those as to how it affects them. So our job as leaders is to provide support. Some of the support that we're doing, and I think others can do these very easily. One is to establish peer teams. And that's using peers inside of your own organization, led by a professional who understands PTSD and other mental health issues, to be able to provide immediate response to their peers whenever they experience a situation. And what that situation is driven by the person. When they raise their hand and say, I need to talk to somebody, a peer goes, and that's the first point of contact. Then there's providing access to mental health resources. Recently, I had an experience where I had a phone call from a director of another service who was asking if we could loan them our mental health professional because they don't even have one that lives in their community. So there's no network established to provide that kind of support throughout the state of Texas, and that's an issue. Another resource that we recently implemented is a chaplaincy program. That's another way to provide support for people. There are chaplaincy programs that you can subscribe to that will build programs for your organizations or groups of organizations. Finally, if you really want to get on top of this as a leader, you need to become a compassionate leader. The things that we're talking about are all the things that you're not taught in management school. These are the soft skills. These are the things that we talk about, the emotional ability to lead people. Well, this is it. This is compassionate leadership. And so that's going to be what drives improvement here. Ultimately, what we're talking about is a change in our culture. The culture that teaches us to suspend judgment, to learn about PTSD and identify resources to treat it, learning to listen, adopting a just culture, putting our people first, engaging our people, the people that work for us, doing this job every day in the discussion. The worst thing that we could do is have a discussion up here that the people don't get to participate in. That won't work. And finally, muster the courage to do the right thing. All right, that's it.
Y'all have any questions for Ernie?
Thank you very much, Ernie. That's a wealth of information. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Ernie, did y'all go to the 24 with a 6-hour break period in y'all's schedule, or did y'all do a blend of different shift combinations?
So we have a blend. We have in the busiest areas, we have 12-hour shifts that are shorter, and we're still going through how that's going to balance out. But one thing we did do is we did rotating shifts. The reason that we did that is because we didn't want to have somebody that's always going to work nights, weekends, and all the holidays. Right. So we rotate that. Everybody gets some of the good, some of the bad. The 24-hour shifts, we had circadian assess them for safety. We have 25 shifts that are 24-hour shifts, and of those, there's only one that's getting close to what they would consider the danger mark. So what we're looking at different options. In order to keep that, we would have to add a peak load unit or something like that to support that area.
When you're saying the danger mark, do you use just a threshold, a certain number of calls in the 24-hour period on average, or do you look at the time spacing as well?
We're looking at all of those things. It's the number of calls that they're running, it's the time space in between, and what they looked at the most was the rest opportunities that are presented during the shift.
Very good, thank you.
And Ernie, I have a question too, and it's about monitoring that workload.
So one of the things that we're doing right now is we have a vendor that's working with us to see if we can, they're linked to our data. It's the Stout program. I can't remember the name of it, but Stout has a program.
First Watch?
Yes, First Watch. And so First Watch is basically an identifying program that looks at your trends and then can give you alerts. So what we're doing is designing a method that it's monitoring our shifts, and anytime that a shift workload exceeds a threshold that we set, it will alert a supervisor who will find those personnel and see how they're doing. The actions that they take are variable. It could be a break, it could be into shift, it could be just about anything, whatever the supervisor and that personnel decide.
Does anybody from the audience have any questions for Ernie or anything you'd like to ask him? Come on up real quick, because we are on the internet, so Ernie, don't walk away too far. Or if you want to sit down, you can sit down next to Brett if you want. Then you have a microphone.
Ernie, do you guys use any online tests for mental acuity when they want to do an extra shift, say they pull the 24, they want to do another? Do you have an online quiz that they can take to see how they're doing?
That's a great question. Do we have an online method that we can assess their ability to do another shift? We've not been able to find a program that does that for us. We did identify that in certain areas of the military, pilots do that, and they do that kind of a testing on a screen. And if they have the acuity, they're allowed to do that. We haven't found one that adapts to what we do. However, what we have put in place is some work rules if a person works so many hours, they have to have so much time off before they can come back.
Okay. Ernie, while it's coming up there, do you have a good feel for UHU of where you're comfortable, where that threshold? Do you have a feel for that yet?
Yeah, I've got some experience working in the private sector, and in the private sector where you're revenue driven, you try to achieve at least a 0.5 UHU. So that basically means they're working half of the time they're doing transports. The other time they're not doing something. But there's a lot of things missing out of that UHU calculation. So what we've done, we do use UHU, we do monitor it, but we included into the calculation other workload measures. Anytime that they're moving, anytime that they're getting a post assignment, anytime they're moving to a location, going somewhere where they're not able to rest, we've added that to UHU. And we're, I think, a better area to target is about the 0.3 to 0.35 area instead of 5.
Including posting assignments and things like that?
Correct.
It's kind of a loaded UHU. Brett, did you have something?
I just want, Ernie, do y'all have a way to monitor the off-duty? Are they actually getting rest, or are they working a second or third EMS job for hospitals?
Well, one of the things that we do is we have a policy that requires our personnel to get approved before they can take an outside job. When we look at that, we look at the number of hours that they plan to work. We don't have a way to monitor that. So a person could put down that they're only going to work a few hours on their request and then go up and work almost full time. I believe that our personnel are being honest when they put that in there. And by and large, they do try to rest. But we do have some out there that were like me when I was growing up. I didn't need any sleep. And so, you know, there's probably some like that.
National EMS Managers Association just did a flash poll, and people were talking about caregiver fatigue, and they said only 20% of them it was really a problem for longer shifts, but over 60% said because they work multiple jobs.
So you said you were going to go from a 48 to a 42-hour work week. So how are you going to get that 6 hours? Where's that coming from?
So what we're doing with the shifts is the way that we work, and we work a long week and a short week. And when you take that and add it together, it comes out to 42 hours.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Ernie, when you're reducing from 48 to 46, or no, from 48 to 42,
yes,
that's 6 hours. How are you keeping the medic whole as far as money-wise? Are y'all increasing their hourly rate, or are they losing that money and in turn driving them to go find another side job?
No, we actually increased the hourly rate so that there's no loss in pay. It's expensive.
Yeah, good job.
Not only is it expensive per hour, we had to add 68 people. So it is expensive. And I don't know about you guys, but I know that at some point that you're accountable to somebody for money. And you can go back and look last year at the videos of me with my counsel having that discussion. It's not an easy discussion. And so, you know, that's one of those things where you really have to prepare. And gaining their understanding of why you want to do it is absolutely key.
Ernie, I just wanted to mention two things. One, at the STRAC conference a couple of weeks ago, we had Dr. Karad. He's a colonel in the military. He was an EMS fellow a couple of years ago and started this with San Antonio Fire and a few other agencies around San Antonio. And it's basically, I think, what you're talking about, but it's about building resiliency in the workforce, and it has those same pillars that you were speaking to. I'd like to introduce you to him and let y'all get to know each other if you've never met him before, because I think you and he are two powerhouses in this, and I think would do a lot to push this. The other thing I would like to is thank you for bringing up the PTSD. Like you, I've been in this business a long time. It's a little over 30 years now. And it is very individual, and I see people who struggle with things, and I'm like, well, man, I've just been blessed that I've not struggled with that. And again, at a STRAC conference, not this year, but last year, Dr. Brian Eastridge, who sits on the Trauma Systems Committee and sits on GTAC, did a talk about his PTSD experience. He's been deployed 6 or 8 times, I can't remember. And just listening to him talk about PTSD was the first time I think I really started to recognize that a lot of the subtle signs of it that I exhibit all the time. And it is a real thing. And I think part of our baby boomer mentality about living to work is that was a sign of weakness. And that, I wasn't bothered by it, and that didn't bother me, and it's no big deal and all that. And somewhere deep upstairs in all those cracks and crevices, there's stuff lurking that is dangerous, and it's damaging to our mental, our physical, and our spiritual well-being. And so I think the more we can change that about PTSD is not a bad thing. We need to start recognizing it and getting our folks help. Even if they don't think they have it, better education so they start to recognize those signs in their life, I think, is tremendous.
Absolutely. The City of Austin has an innovation office, and we started working with them, and they brought in other people, other consultants that work with us, and we had a long discussion about fatigue. It was so long we got tired of talking about fatigue. We were fatigued about fatigue. So we decided that one of the most important changes that we need to do to get our viewpoint aimed correctly is to change the subject matter from fatigue to resilience, and regaining the resilience and maintaining the resilience of the EMS professional through not just the job, but the lifetime. At some point, they're going to transition to a different location, a different job, maybe they're going to retire and do something different. We don't want the leftovers of what they've done for the 20 years that they did it to haunt them forever. So the recognition of PTSD is absolutely important. Unlike you, I didn't know I had it until I learned what it was.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that happened years and years ago. Wish I'd have known what it was, wish I'd have known how to care for it back then.
One thing I'd say, in Dallas, we actually started a CISM team about 25 years ago. I think it took about 15 years to finally get them to truly accept it. So just know when you start these programs, you're going to get some pushback, especially from some of the older generations that have that mentality of, there's nothing wrong, we handle this all the time, this is our job. And it's taken a lot of time to get to where they felt comfortable calling and saying, hey, we need someone to come out, And it may just be at that one paramedic company, or it may be a whole group of them. But just understand, it is a cultural change, and it will take some time. We literally started off by just making it mandatory. We didn't give them a choice. If you made a certain type run, we're coming, whether you like it or not. And eventually they began to see the benefits and began to do it. The other thing I'd say that we've really noticed, and I don't know if you've seen it, but we've seen it a lot, is the fire service has always been a very popular place for people coming out of the military, and especially with the group of military that we're getting, a lot of them are coming already with PTSD and a lot of mental health issues. And we're having to really alter some of the things we do and to try to find different ways of helping this group that, they like it because we have that similar going out and helping people and that high adrenaline stuff. But I know we've talked to a number of mental health issues because of some of the issues we're seeing in our department, and they're saying the truth is it probably isn't the right place for them to go to, but they're naturally attracted to it, and we've always taken them. We've always, really gone liking that group, and we certainly are, still doing so. But just be aware that there is, as these military guys come back from overseas, a lot of them have seen a lot and they've been through a lot. And they're already going to have that PTSD before they ever step on that ambulance for the first time.
So, Ernie, have you been able to measure your morale before you started the program, after you started the program? Are you seeing a change?
Yes, we actually do, and we saw a huge dip in the morale of our organization after the suicides. And I'll just be honest with you, that target was on my head, and my people didn't believe in me for a while. We've done a lot, I get emotional about that. We've done a lot of work now, and we've improved. Recently, we did a job satisfaction survey. It came back very positive, and we were surprised by that. But we found that we had, out of 7 areas that we explored, 4 really strong ones and 3 weak areas that we're going to work on. Recently, just earlier this week, as a matter of fact, we went through our CAS reaccreditation process, and the examiners were really upfront about what they were going to do this time.
because they had been following us for quite some time, and they'd seen the issues that we were dealing with, the suicide, the morale, and all of that. And they went out point blank, asked our personnel what they thought, and they came back with smiles. And they said, whatever it is that you guys are doing, it's having an impact. Personnel are feeling good about their shifts. They're feeling positive about their leadership. And whatever you did turned the ship. And I'll tell you, a lot of it had to do with the peer network, a chaplaincy program, learning to listen and talking less. So some of that actually had a positive impact. And that's what I call the compassionate leadership.
So just to comment, if you mind. So we all get into EMS because we want to affect somebody's life, and we do that, and we do a good job of that, and we get that fulfillment. Very, very few of us affect the industry by decisions that we make, and you've done that. I want to thank you for doing that.
Ernie, now, so for potentially one of the most difficult questions, or maybe not, I think maybe you've been thinking about this, but as the EMS subcommittee for GTAC, as GTAC, the organization that makes recommendations to DSHS, how do you see us, what can we do to spread this, help you, help the industry in Texas? What do we need to be doing?
Well, I think there's a few things. A lot of it really rests in education and awareness. When I first started talking about some of these things that I learned, studying about how EMS personnel are seeing increases in divorce and alcoholism and drug abuse and all of that, I got some very negative responses when I started talking about that. People became defensive about that. And that's an educational awareness issue. I think everyone who's going to practice in emergency medical services needs to understand those things, not just from the perspective of what they are, because we certainly learn what they are in our training, but what we don't learn is how we are personally affected and how we can experience those things in our own lives. That's one piece I think we could improve on. Another piece is, as I mentioned, there's a whole assortment of things that you don't learn in management school when you're learning how to run a business or anything like that. And those are the things that are causing the issues right now. So some method that we can put into place so that everyone who leads EMS organizations understands these issues and understands that we can survive this stuff if we have the courage and the resources and the capability of applying solutions. And every solution is going to be different for every different organization. We're all going to approach the situation with different limits and different organizational needs. But all of us can do it if there's some sort of understanding about the methodology behind it, the cause behind it, the root cause. One of the things that I think is a huge need for us is a need for a stronger mental health network that can care for EMS personnel in a different way than we have today. Right now, we're all winging it. We're all doing it on our own. Some of us can afford it, some of us can't. I'm lucky. I've got one that the city hired. We have a mental health professional on staff, and we have a contract that specializes in PTSD. So I'm one of the lucky ones. We have that. Most organizations don't have anything close to that. So that's something that I think we could work on, is how do we build that network of support so that we can provide the needs and meet the needs of those who are struggling with some of these issues.
Okay. Thank you, Ernie, for coming out to talk. I'm going to make a shameless plug. The EMS Alliance has their conference coming up in June on Lake Conroe, and the Alliance is able to get Ernie, who sits on their board, to come out. He's going to spend an hour talking about this and take a little bit deeper dive into what we've been able to do here. I would recommend that. From the committee, what's your pleasure on this currently?
Dudley, I just wanted to, hello, I'm Anthony Luna. I just actually wanted to comment on this as well, because we're seeing the effects of this, but it's to the point to where we're seeing abuse in prescription drugs, which is just, it's actually getting to the crisis level by the time we see them. I actually sit on the committee where we review and talk to the individuals that we've proposed an action against, and so I like what was said today, because I would say the cat's out of the bag at this point. PTSD, we see it every day, I would say, with the cases that we deal with. And this is the first time that it's been brought up, and so I'm glad that we're at that point now because we can start dealing with it. And I appreciate that because I watched people in here just now as that was being said, and I saw the cringe and just kind of the uncomfortableness around it. And in order for us to help, we've got to talk about it. And this is the forum now that we've got to address it. Because if we don't do it now, the suicide rate is going to continue to go up. Because I have been in informal conferences with individuals that have left, and I don't know how much longer they're going to be with us because of the extent that they can't talk to a peer. Because this is a field where you go as hard as you can for as long as you can, and then you crash. And we've got to take action, and we've got to be aware that this is a problem that's happening in every organization, and it's extensive, and it's the deprivation, the sleep deprivation is huge, and I'm glad that the shift awareness is coming across now, because there's things that we can do, and each of y'all have stories, and I encourage you to share that, because you've been there and you've done that and you've seen it. Don't hide your story, tell it, because you probably experienced something similar, but to show compassion and and empathy is important in these cases because we see the effects at the end, and we're wanting in a state where I wish we could do more, but we can't because we don't have a peer assistance program. And I think Ernie would be a wonderful candidate to head that. I mean, because I see what he's doing right now with his system. And we've got to address that not tomorrow but today, because the effects and this hits close to home for me because my dad's a veteran, a Vietnam vet, and he was diagnosed with PTSD in 2005. And I'm in these informal conferences, and I'm seeing the same effect of the sleeplessness. They start to isolate themselves, and you probably see this every day with somebody. And so when you begin to see that, you need to talk to that individual and just say, how are you doing? And sometimes it's as simple as that. But it is hard to look at somebody when they're reflecting something back to you that you're dealing with yourself. And so we have to be able to communicate and let people know what's going on. And it's so important here. And we've got to address it now, because I keep on hearing we're going to start a work group, but we've got to do it now, and it's important. And so I'm glad that the cat is out of the bag, and that's the only thing I can say. And I appreciate what's being said here today because we see the effect of it. And so I hope that we take this seriously today and we just don't stop. Please continue, and that's all that I ask for. Thank you.
Thank you. Curtis, did you have something?
Thank you. Just briefly, the Code Green campaign is a nonprofit organization that does a lot of work on the same lines of mental health awareness for first responders. During EMS week this upcoming week, our RAC is going to focus on our responder health. I'm taking this opportunity because I've been affected by friends in the industry that have committed suicide. And I think it's time that EMS week is about EMS, and it's about us helping each other and looking inward. So I ask that each of you take a little bit of time during EMS week this week to help push these initiatives forward also.
Thank you, Curtis.
And I think our greatest hurdle is with the providers, with the leaders, is changing their culture and getting them to start really looking at their employees and taking care of their employees and providing mental and physical fitness and compassionate leadership, as Ernie said. And I think that's our greatest challenge, is to change the culture of the providers.
Thoughts from others? All right, we got the peer thing moving forward. I'd like to ask everybody to spend some time. This is going to stay on our agenda. I think we need to try to put, it may grow out of the peer rehabilitation thing, the peer assistance thing, I don't know. but I would encourage everybody to take a deeper dive into this. Feel free to reach out to Ernie. He's a busy guy, but he will get back to you when he can. Explore this a little bit more, and let's try to put our hands around what it is we can do, what it is we can ask DSHS to help us do, what it is we can ask our stakeholder groups and our associations to do to help start this change.
I agree that the committee should continue to look into this, but what about expanding the charter for the peer group to the peer rehabilitation program to take it to resilience? Yeah, because we can look at the end result, but if we don't ever address root cause, which is most likely in many of these cases PTSD, we're just putting Band-Aids on the end problem. So it's almost like build it into a prevention combination with that.
Okay. I know of some folks we can reach out to that are very good in that would probably help us with that. So I'll mention that to GTAC on Friday, and we'll go from there. Ernie, I can't thank you enough for coming out. I appreciate you. I know it was short notice, but I know the work you're doing, and you'd be lauded for taking that pioneering effort. I've read some of those newspaper articles. I've seen some of those TV stories, and it takes a brave man to stand up and take those shots for the people that work with them. So even if they don't know they need it. So real quick before the time gets away from us, I'm going to ask Justin and Eddie to give a quick update on the rural EMS National Conference, and then we have Dr. McNally from the CARES program that wants to give a quick update during general public comment. So Dr. McNally, I'm going to ask if you'd come forward and get ready for that while Justin and Eddie are giving their update from the National Rural EMS Conference that was held here in Texas.
Go ahead, Justin. Go ahead.
All right, Dr. McNally, you ready? Come on.
What state?
It was the EMS conference, National Rural EMS Conference, held in San Antonio a couple weeks ago. Very small city in Texas. We were glad they hosted it. There was about 150 participants from 26 to 28 states. The furthest state away was Alaska. There were lots of great discussion from telemedicine to community paramedicine. Kevin McGinnis was there to talk about EMS 3.0 and the future of EMS. Some things that we learned about, there was a lot of discussion about Replica. If you don't understand what Replica is, it's a compact for EMS, and Texas has already actually signed the petition to become a Replica state. We learned through our state director, Joe, and I think there's 6 other states or 7 other states that have currently signed the Replica agreement. Once it gets to 10 states who agree, then they will move forward with that nationally. We had some great presenters from Texas that showed up. All in all, it was a very good conference, and as what I've heard from the National Rural Health Office is that they plan on doing it again next year. A location has not been determined, but a little over 50% of the room was from Texas, so we had a good turnout, so we were proud for that.
Anything to add to that, Eddie? All right, Dr. McNally, we're going to turn it over to you. Dr. McNally, Dr. Beeson brought him to me asking if we could have a few minutes. He's on the agenda of the Medical Directors Committee to talk about the CARES program and something that they want to do here in Texas to allow more of us to participate. So.
Appreciate the opportunity, and I will be brief. I know this ends at noon, so when I see the high sign, that means I have a minute, so just let me know.
Okay.
Really wanted to talk about the program, to realize that we've been working in Texas now for several years. About a quarter of the state is participating in the program. Houston and Austin Travis County were 2 of our original sites outside of Atlanta when we began. Next slide, yep. This is our mission statement. It's really to help communities collect uniform out-of-hospital cardiac metrics to be able to do quality improvement and do benchmarking. Our vision statement is to work with, next slide, is to work with as many communities as possible. As the project has expanded over the last 13 years, we're now currently working with about almost 1/3 of the U.S. population, 15 states we have coordinators. And really the purpose of me coming out to Texas is to talk later today. There'll be discussion about trying to move towards trying to have a coordinator at the state level, that, as we've done in other states, to allow for statewide participation and to try to figure out what's the best way to make that happen. Next slide. This is the growth nationally about 1,100 EMS agencies, over 1,500 hospitals, represents a population base around 90 million. And really, as we've grown, we realize state-based participation really is the best way to expand towards a national registry. Next slide, please. This is our current footprint where you see green. We have a state coordinator. Where you see yellow, we have more than 50% of the state on board without a coordinator. Where you see red is community-specific. I'll show you a slide in a bit. This is the states we're really trying to focus on, and as you can see why Texas is highlighted. California, we just came out with a coordinator in January, so another large state where we've had about a quarter of the state population on board already. Next slide. And this is the idea, getting communities to participate, having state level guidance with a coordinator can help expand and provide for a more efficient method to participate and eventually grow towards a national registry. Next slide, please. Institute of Medicine came out with a report back in June that really focused on cardiac arrest both in the hospital and outside, and these are the eight main recommendations. The first one, as you can see there, is establishing a national registry for both at a hospital and in hospital. Next slide. This is a lot more words, but basically saying the same thing, that communities and states should collect the data and participate, and we recognize the CDC was really our founding funding organization. We've transitioned to private funding and now developed a subscription model to help more states come on board and sustain the registry. Next slide. This is current state, where you see red are participating sites. Again, about 25% or 6.7 million population base participating CARES today in Texas. A number of other communities are on the wait list and interested, and we're obviously open to working with more, and we think a state-based model with a coordinator will help us expand to more communities. Next. In the next 3 minutes, I'm going to show you statistics. This is actual data that's aggregated from all the sites that participated in Texas from 2015. Next slide. And it's showing on the right, obviously, is Texas. On the left is national data to give you an idea of, these are the types of metrics that we can provide back to the community confidentially, and again, aggregated so we can show state-based metrics. Yep, that's okay. And I'm going to move through, we'll just let you look at it so I don't, but back down to understanding who's actually initiating CPR. You know, is it a bystander? Is it a first responder? Is it an EMS provider? Being able to understand that, being able to understand the actual demographics of the arrest itself, and looking at, you know, was an AED, for example, applied in a tiered manner. Next slide. And then when an AED is being used, who's actually applying it? Next slide, please. Looking at the actual outcome in terms of ROSC being obviously the biggest predictor of survival. These are obviously all EMS metrics. Each hospital that participates has the ability to log in and see their own data, so we can generate a hospital-specific report with state-level benchmarking as well. Next slide, please. And then really looking at overall metrics in terms of survival to admission, survival to discharge, and then survival with good neurological outcome or CDC score. This last slide here is really looking at a much more favorable situation. Utstein is basically a bystander witnessed event, and the patient presents in a shockable rhythm. And then on the right is that same event where there's actually bystander intervention, you know, CPR and/or defibrillation. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of present and see if there's any questions. I'm going to be talking at the next committee meeting, and then there'll be I guess, an open session after the breakout room following the next committee meeting to discuss what the next steps might be.
Okay, any questions for Dr. McNally from the group? Tell you a little bit about what they're working on. Is this Texas-based CARES group, right? So I think it came out of NAEMSP. Some folks had, some of our physician medical directors, most of the ones that serve on our medical directors committee and some others, came back from that saying Texas really needs to do this. I'll tell you, as an EMS director, when San Antonio came on board, we really looked at trying to do that regionally. And for a smaller agency, even though I'm not a small agency in Texas eyes, but the cost of doing that as an individual agency was a little bit prohibitive, really. But doing it together as a state, I think spreads that cost across a number of agencies. Plus, it allows us as a state to move forward in that way. So the meeting that Dr. McNally's talking about, he's going to present a little bit slower, probably a little bit more time at medical directors. But he's also going to be after that, so that goes from 1 to 2:30, and at 2:30 in the pop-off room is going to be a meeting to have a discussion about how we set this up in Texas. And so would welcome anybody's attention or attendance. It's an open meeting. Everybody is welcome to attend. There'll be some talk about some budgeting stuff and things like that, because looking at how other states have done it, there's already been a little bit of work on what kind of money would it take to do it here in Texas. But nothing is set in stone, and the more we get to participate, the better off we'll be. So 2:30 in the pop-off room, I believe, is where it's located. And we'll be talking more about that if you don't make the medical directors meeting. Dr. McNally, I appreciate you taking the time to present to us.
Thank you very much.
You bet. All right, is there anything else in public comment that we haven't touched on? Did we get through our agenda?
I got one.
Okay.
I know this was on the Education Committee, so I'm not trying to double do it here, but I had the pleasure of attending the Beacon course put on by Nick Crack this last week. And I just want to say it's kind of exciting to look at going forward and how can I implement that in my community. And it's a good stepping off point to train the trainer, to look at, I kind of feel like we're looking at where we were with AEDs, like 10 years ago, like teaching people how to use them, getting them everywhere. Now with tourniquets, we need to start looking at within your community. I encourage everyone to look at whether it be, we're looking at school nurses, we're looking at AEDs, we're looking at different buildings, we're looking at how can you train that and start becoming the norm for your community also. So just want to put in a little plug for that. I think it's going to be coming down pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Stop the Bleed Texas is a tremendous effort. It's gaining a lot of steam. It's being talked about in all corners of the state. Something to definitely investigate, talk to your RAC about, get involved at the ground level. Much like the AED thing, we push tourniquets out to all our police officers in the districts we serve, and they're more eager to use tourniquets than they are AEDs. It's amazing. So they're slapping tourniquets on everything that's bleeding. So it's amazing, but it really is nice to get there with somebody with a really catastrophic injury, and have PD have already done that, and now it's a matter of getting them to the trauma center so they can get that bleeder taken care of. So it really is. I mean, it's got a lot of potential. It is gaining a lot of steam in the state. So anything else?
Really quick, public comment. I'm on the Texas Line of Duty Death Task Force, and we were able to get a proclamation from Governor Abbott to name May as Fallen First Responder Awareness Month. And today is Dress in Purple Day. I hate the lights are so funny, and you can't appreciate my purple and white shirt. Yes, I forgot my shirt at home. Yeah, if you have time, go to the Texas Line of Duty Death Task Force website, and you can learn more about Dress in Purple and the May Fallen First Responder Awareness Month.
Dudley, just two quick items.
Yes, sir.
You may have heard the National Paramedic Psychomotor Portfolio. And if you haven't heard that, talk to your education programs. That's where National Registry testing for paramedics only is changing to a paramedic portfolio of skills, practice, and combination of verification in the programs, and a basis of scenario-based testing at the end of the course. That'll start in August of this year, and they'll implement that officially in January of 17 as part of the scenario-based testing. The next thing is probably heard that National Registry changed their CE process. They did it to flip the switch on Texas on April 1st after everybody recertified, to where if the new National Registry CE, and that's called National Continued Competency Program, where there's a national component, a local or state component, and an individual component for CE. And an example of that would be the paramedic CE hours where it went down to 60 every 2 years, with 15% of that being online or distributed education. And then there's those three topics: national, local, and individual. There is no state mandated content in Texas, so it can all come from the local agency or medical director. And if you, with that being, there's no change, there's no way, you don't need to transfer or translate your CE hours. If you maintain your National Registry certification and you use that option to recertify in Texas, all we're going to do verify on an audit is that you are maintaining that certification. And so don't have to panic. Yes, you do have to do less CE hours if you're doing the CE for National Registry.
Awesome. Anything else for the good of the group? All righty, we started on time. We're 33 seconds from the thing making noise. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. Medical director starts in an hour right here in this same room.